الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
Bismillahi walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum everyone, and peace be upon you all. Welcome to this weekly halaqah. Forgive me in advance, I'm not feeling too well today, so we're gonna cut it a little short, but I'll try to leave a little bit of time for discussion or questions at the end, inshallah. So yeah, if you just can have it quiet a little bit over there. Okay, so today's topic is about the psycho-spiritual power of knowing yourself. So when I say psycho-spiritual, I mean the psychological and spiritual power, just the integration between both. This is a topic that's, very dear to my heart. I've had my own personal journey with really trying to understand early on in my journey, how can I know myself through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I particularly think it's also important from it became even more clear to me how important it is in my work over the years, professionally. It's, as Muslims, our faith is rooted in tawheed, right? In the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that everything points to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that we don't have really a conflict even when we learn about anything and like the sciences, knowledge, right? As Muslims, we have a long history in our tradition of seeking to understand and seeking to know, whether it's nature or astronomy or medicine, right? There was never any conflict between studying any of these things and our tawheed. Why? Because if you look at, especially if you look at the golden age of Islam, you'll see that people from all over the world, this is when, Muslim Islamic scholarship was at the height of civilization, right? And scholars and, people from all over the world of different faiths would come and study under Muslim scholars. So Muslim scholars at that time were at the forefront of astronomy, of medicine, of, health in general, physics, right? You name it. They were studying it. And why? Because it all pointed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so early on in my journey, I always wondered, there wasn't a lot of talk about how can we understand ourselves. Okay, so where does myself fall into this? Because many of us as Muslims are scared to know and to love ourselves because we don't want to be arrogant. We don't want to, become narcissistic. We don't want to forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't want it to center around ourselves. And so these are questions I had early on in my journey. How can I know myself through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is there a relationship here between knowing myself and knowing Allah? And so it took time. Last session we talked about how, for every question we have that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah chooses not only the answer but also the time to unveil us from that truth. And so for me, a big statement that made a crucial impact on me in finding this answer was the statement in our tradition of man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu. Whoever knows himself knows his Lord. And this was actually one of the first times that I saw in one statement the self and Allah being put in one, that there's a relationship here. Excuse me. My goodness. In this statement, there's a relationship here that I saw between knowing ourselves and knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's no conflict. But the key here is what? Is that the self is not the destination. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the destination. Meaning, that do I see Allah as the source of everything that I notice about myself, right? Do I see Allah as the source of who I am and what I need? And, you know, we don't have this conflict also when we look at nature. We love to be present with nature, right? We love to recognize the beauty in nature. We love to, you know, witness it and know it. And that only points us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That only helps us know Allah. That actually helped me understand this statement very clearly. Because when I first heard it, I was like, what does it mean? Man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu. What does this really mean? What does it mean that if knowing ourselves leads to knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And so when I asked, you know, some of my teachers, you know, the feedback I got was that, you know, well, part of it is knowing, being self-accountable, that the more you are accountable, the more that you will be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's presence with you, right? And the more that you will know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your Lord, right? Because you're holding yourself accountable in front of Allah. You're aware of Him, you're present with Him, you're connecting with Him through that self-accountability. So it brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But again, as I continued the journey of really exploring that question, it really became evident to me through me being in nature. And I thought, wow, subhanAllah, when I see the sunset, when I see the moon, when I see anything beautiful in Allah's creation, we say what? Subhanallah, right? And it makes us remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this showed me how important it is to know ourselves, because guess what? I am His creation too. And you are His creation too. And actually not knowing yourself, not knowing His creation, yourself, can limit you from knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because guess what? When you don't, for example, you're not connected to yourself. You're not connected to the truths within you. Meaning you're not connected to what? You're not connected to the truths of your values, the truths of your beliefs that have been guiding you, even the truths of your emotions from circumstance to circumstance. And it's actually because of this disconnect from knowing ourselves truthfully, where the eye of our heart is on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not on me, myself, and I, right? This actually leads to a more authentic and truthful and sincere connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It prevents us from being on cruise control, where we're just going through the motions. So when you're disconnected from yourself, you're not really assessing what is real, what is not real within you, where is the root of this emotion, where's the root of this thought. You're not really connected to the truth of that experience. And so when you go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're saying things, but you're really disconnecting from your inner experience. And when you have a rich connection to this inner world, your relationship with Allah becomes rich as well. Because guess what you're bringing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Truth. When you allow yourself to know your emotions, to feel them, to know where they're coming from, then when you go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh, you're having a very emotionally connected conversation, right? Because you're grounded. You're not like a leaf in the wind, right? You're not like, you know, scattered. No, you actually are connected to yourself. I know what I'm bringing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am present with myself as I am present with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I am intentional about what I'm saying. I am aware of what I'm saying. I'm not just giving lip service. I'm not just giving words without being grounded and present with my Creator as I'm talking to Him. So the spiritual power in knowing ourselves is that you know Allah. That through your presence with yourself and through knowing yourself, you get to experience knowing the one who created this rich world within you. You feel love within you for yourself and for others. You remember Al-Wadud, the most loving, the source of love, the creator of love. And so it's almost like you experience something, the eye of your heart goes to Allah. Ya Allah, you gave me this, alhamdulillah. Or, Ya Allah, I'm struggling with this, help me. You see the difference between looking at this through looking at knowing ourselves through an Islamic perspective versus like the self-centered, oftentimes, the perspective that we hear. It's that I don't stop here. I don't end here. I am not the Lord of myself, and this is not the destination. And so when you know yourself, so that's the spiritual power of it, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-haq. He's the truth. He has named himself the truth. So in the very core of our faith and our experience of faith is this emphasis of truth, of us connecting to truth. And that includes connecting to ourselves. And seeing the beauty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put within us, collectively and individually. And this is something we often miss, right? That no human being is like another, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed us this message, or sent us this message through our very fingertips. That no one's fingerprint. Like, think about this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know how people like, mass produce products? Allah did not mass produce us, right? Every single person is so uniquely designed to the very tips of their fingers. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, does man think that we cannot assemble, his bones? He says, nay, we are able to put together in perfect order the very tips of his fingertips, or his very tips of his fingers. Meaning what? Meaning, I know you. To the very tips of your fingers, I know you. And just as I have put you together, right? And people say, people believe in, what's it called? When people spreading the ashes, right? This is like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, it doesn't matter if your ashes are spread, in the middle of the ocean, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could put us back together to the tips of our fingers. But we're each so unique. And this is so important to know, because sometimes, because a lot of Muslims come from very extremely interdependent cultures, where there was, or many Muslims struggle with codependency, and there's a lack of that individuation of knowing themselves outside of their family system, outside of their loved ones. That process didn't happen, right? Due to trauma, due to difficult experiences, they didn't get, an opportunity to see themselves, or to know themselves, to see themselves as a separate, unique self, which is a natural process of human development. And it's so important to understand that, that uniqueness, because that's how you serve in the best way. That's how you focus and you maximize your life, by looking at, what did Allah give me? But the beautiful thing in doing this in a God-centered way is that you see Allah as the source of what He gave you. So when you see the blessings of others, you see the same source. And this is what I call sacred self-knowledge, or sacred self-love, right? Is that what you know and love about yourself, if you know and love yourself, through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you will know how to love others through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This concept of loving others for the sake of Allah. What does that mean? It's that you see Allah in your relationship with others, in your interactions with others. That you love others through Al-Wadud, the most loving. That you see the blessings of others, but you see the creator of that blessing. Right? And so it's that the eye of your heart is still on your Rabb, not on the creator, not on the creation. And it's the same thing with yourself. I'm interacting with myself, I see Allah. I see Him as the creator. I see Him as the one who gave me these qualities. I see Him as the one who has never left me. I see Him as the one who fashioned me uniquely, and has given me gifts to utilize in this world. And everybody has their own strengths and has their own challenges. But if we don't take time to know ourselves, we live a life that doesn't reach the potential, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for us. Because you can't use what you don't know. You can't use what you don't interact with. And again, this doesn't mean, sometimes when we say, oh, your potential in serving, people almost think like, oh yeah, I got to know my skills so I could translate that into a career. It's not always about monetizing what you know about yourself, or making a social media page now, because you know what I mean. Like, there's always this emphasis now, like knowing myself means I have to go outward now and make sure that I create something like so big with it. No, it's just about day to day. How do you use what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you? I'm not saying not to do grand things. I'm just saying that, sometimes we miss the day-to-day moments, the day-to-day opportunities to use what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you. Yarhamukallah. Where even in your interactions, Allah gave you a different personality than He gave her, right? Allah gave you different strengths than He gave her different challenges than He gave you. And so even when you are interacting with people, think about, let's say like you're in a situation where you were able to help a friend out with something she's going through, or you were able to make somebody's day, or you were able to be kind. Those are personality traits Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you. Do you see Allah in those moments? Right? Do you see, when you get an iPhone and you see like all those features, like we're so, like people get a new phone and they appreciate all the features of the phone, right? And it's like there's so many and of course that the phone did not create itself, right? You know that, like, right, that there's something that created this, someone that created this. And so with us, it's like, it's the same thing. It's like recognizing all of these features, but you recognize that someone gave it to you. And so taking the time to really understand who you are and to appreciate the one who made you who you are. And to understand that you are on a journey with Him in utilizing your strengths, but also overcoming your challenges. And so we're not meant to be perfect. So what does it mean to know? And this is going to be a two-part, because like I said, I'm going to wrap up early today. But inshallah, next time we have the halaqah, I'll go into more depth about this topic. It's a very, it's not a topic we can fill in 20-30 minutes. So what are some of the benefits of knowing ourselves? Number one, you learn to accept the truths that come up within you. And this is really important because many people struggle with not accepting the truth of who they are. Actually, one of the reasons many people struggle when it comes to a relationship with themselves is that they reject pieces of themselves. How do you feel if someone rejects you? You say hello and they ignore you. How does that feel? Doesn't feel good, right? But many people often overlook self-rejection. Self-rejection is when you reject yourself, when you hate pieces of yourself, when you deny aspects of yourself. And this is the opposite of acceptance. And so when you don't like aspects of yourself, or you reject aspects of yourself, guess what happens when someone points something out about you? Or guess how you will carry yourself? You're always going to be on guard. You're always going to try to cover up, those pieces of yourself that you have denied. In psychology, especially particularly in Carl Jung's work, he calls this the shadow, right? The part of you that you have denied, the part of you that you have, that you're not proud of, you're ashamed of, the pieces of you tried to hide behind a mask so that you could present this ideal image of who you think will be accepted, of who you think will be approved of by the people. All right, so like I said, this definitely is a topic we'll cover more in detail, but the reason I'm mentioning that is because knowing ourselves is also accepting the good, the bad, and ugly, as I say, but not to ever indicate, not to ever like suggest that anyone has ugly in them, right? But just that expression of like, there are pieces of ourselves we don't like, there are pieces of ourselves we like, but part of facing your shadow, or facing the parts of you that, knowing who you are, part of this experience of knowing who you are is to accept what you like about yourself, but what you also don't want others to see. And so this is how you become more truthful. Because when you accept it, guess what you're doing less of? Monitoring other people's impression of you. I accepted it, so I no longer need to hide behind a mask. Now, does accepting it means you don't want to change it? Absolutely not. Acceptance does not mean that you don't want to improve, that you don't want to grow, that you don't want to actually take efforts to become a better person. No. It's just saying, and sometimes actually what you don't like about yourself is not something that's actually bad. It's just you have perceived it as something that is bad. Right? It's not, it could be something that's not haram, something that Allah does, like it could be something totally okay. But because of messages you have received or your own upbringing, your own experiences, it could be a quality of yourself, part of your personality you always disliked. And I was talking about this with my students. We were talking about, I was giving the example of someone who says, growing up, I worked with someone once who said, growing up, I was always told that I was the one who talked too much, right? And like in her family. And so that was a quality that she always tried to hide, or that, she hated about herself when she really didn't talk that much. But that was her perception of herself, right? So I'm saying, like, sometimes what you're hiding, what the qualities that you don't like about yourself, or the qualities that you've rejected about yourself, aren't necessarily bad qualities. You just have viewed them, because of different situations and different messages that you've received, as unlikable. But it's so amazing when you come to terms with yourself and okay, this is me. This is part of my personality. Now, should I tweak it? Like, should I improve things about myself? For what reason? You have to ask yourself why. Is it something displeasing to Allah? Is it something that will make Allah happier with me? Okay, then definitely it's worth changing, right? But whenever you start tweaking the normal qualities that Allah has given you to be accepted by other people, you reject parts of yourself. You end up being more disconnected from yourself. And you end up feeling like, I don't know who I am. So you become very shaky. You go high when people praise you, you go very low when people criticize you. Come like a leaf in the wind. You go whatever direction seems like you'll be more likable or acceptable. So a lot of people pleasing. These are some of the harms of not knowing ourselves. And if we look at the seerah, we see a great tradition, great examples of amazing, the best of people who walk this earth, right? Who knew themselves. Omar radiallahu anhu knew he was not like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, right? They had different personalities, but they knew they complemented each other, especially in their leadership, right? And so that's how we should be, and that's what we lack in our community a lot of times, is that if we owned our own strengths, if we knew really clearly who we are, what our strengths are, what our limitations are, we would collaborate more with each other. We would complement each other's strengths. We would be acceptance is also knowing, okay, Allah did not give me that quality, and that's okay. What did He give me? And what did He give them that we can utilize? Right? Because Allah is like, we can all be utilized for good. And that's what makes, it so beautiful, is that, we all have a way to contribute good to the world. If we all had the same strengths, if we all had the same challenges, then we wouldn't be solving different problems in the world. But maybe Allah gave you a particular strength that meets a particular need in the world, or in your family, or in your circle, or where He placed you in life. Again, it doesn't have to be big, right? It's like, how can Allah use me here, where I am? And then you say, okay, well, you encounter an obstacle, and you assess what skills you can use. And you realize, what, I don't have, maybe this is a skill that I need to build. Maybe who has this skill, who we can be used to contribute to this problem. When you see Allah as the source, we work together. When you know yourself, you know your limitations, and you know how you can be utilized. And then you become really good at seeing other people's, strengths too, and how they can be utilized. So you learn to accept yourself, and you get better at making grounded choices, not impulsive choices. Because when you know yourself, you get to know also what you need, not always what you want. I mean, you know the difference between what you want and what you need. So impulsive choices are usually rooted in, I want this, go. Knowing yourself allows you to know there's a difference between my needs and my wants. Needs lead to long-term growth, long-term nourishment, long-term, thriving. Wants give you temporary feel good, right? And sometimes the goal is that your needs become your wants, where you see beauty in fulfilling your needs. Being disliked won't bother you as much when you know yourself. There's a saying, I don't remember which companion said this, but when you know yourself, you will not be shaken by what people say about you. And that's so true. And you see this, right? The people who are really secure within themselves and know themselves don't freak out as much when someone says something that is not true about them. Right? It's okay to be bothered when someone says something that's not true about you, that's not consistent with your values. But your reaction is in proportion, because you know who you are. You know what you stand for. You know what your truth is. And you know what your truth is in front of Allah. That's the most important thing. Self-compassion becomes something that you're more able to do. You become to have a greater balance of, or not balance, but like you're able to hold yourself accountable while still having that component of mercy, that necessary ingredient of compassion. And that's really important. And then another thing that happens also when you know yourself is that you're more able to overcome your fears. Because when you don't know yourself, you don't know what you're scared of. There's no connection to the inner where or there's no strong connection to the inner world where you're assessing, well, why am I scared of this? What is the root fear of this? And so a person who knows themselves knows what their fears are. And when you know yourself and you know your fears, you have a better chance at what? Working towards overcoming them. Okay. I'll stop here and I'll take some questions.
How can I incorporate in my day-to-day life those aspects? Like, sometimes I forget, like, who am I? And, like, how practical advice would you give? Especially when, like, for instance, what I realize is when I'm working full-time, I forget myself, for sure. If I don't sit on Sunday, afternoons down and plan the next week and reflect on what happened. But again, it's not me focused, but it's more like what's happened next week. It's more focused on work, whatever. How can I take that?
Yeah, so the question is, for those who are viewing us online, the question is, how do I implement this day to day? I think the best way to know yourself is to look at your actions. The truth of who we are shows up in our actions. Remember I said in the beginning that what is self-knowledge? It's knowing your beliefs, knowing your values. What are beliefs and values? First, beliefs are all the messages that you have acquired over the years about who you are, about your own self-perception, right? about, you know, your views. It's just all these beliefs that are guiding you. Your beliefs about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your beliefs about life, your beliefs about others, your beliefs about, this is why we have to take care of this inner world and assess what are the beliefs that are guiding my actions. And your values. This is the main thing. People, you know, this who am I question is so vague, right? Or like it's so unclear. When you ask who you are, you're asking, what do I stand for? What are my truths? What are my values? What are my beliefs? And the best way to know that is through our actions. What comes out of my mouth? For example, I believe I'm an honest person, right? But then if you say that about yourself and then you're lying, oh, I just lied. Okay, there's a disconnect here, right? So that's when you begin the process of really understanding who you are. And understanding that there's always opportunity for change. And it's not about shaming yourself. It's not like saying, oh man, I'm a liar now, you know. It's just saying, okay, well, there's a disconnect here. Focus on the behavior. See how your values show up in your day-to-day. What do you, values are what you deem, excuse me. Values are what you deem important in life. So everybody has different values. You have values in your relationships, friendships, right? Everybody has different values. So, you know, a value could be, oh, I value communication. Okay, well, look at do you communicate? You know, I value, you know, that's something you think is part of who you are, that I value my relationship with Allah. I value Allah. He's my highest value, right? He's my highest priority. Okay, then look where your salah is. Does your day revolve around your prayers, your appointments with them? I like to always say appointments with Allah or meetings with Allah, because that's what they are. Does our day revolve around our 5 meetings with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or do our 5 meetings with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revolve around our day? So a great way, I think I've mentioned this before, but just in case, you know, great way to make sure that your day revolves around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is even when you're planning it, when you're setting your schedule for the day, and take it day by day. You know, sometimes people make so many like long-term plans that they forget to make short-term, and I mean day-to-day, because really essentially and this is good to know for those who are planning their New Year goals, like focus on what are daily habits you want to incorporate day-to-day that will allow me to be consistent with my values. But first, identify what your values are. And that's a great exercise to do, you know. Go home today and or sometime, this week, reflect. What are my values? What do I deem important? First start with, what do I claim is important in my life? Write them down. Okay, then assess, okay, how much of these are claims. Remember, we're saying, what do I claim is important? Think of your conversations, think of things you always say, right? And then write, okay, how many of these are actually my values? So how do I know that? How do they show up in my actions? Yeah. Yeah.
I know you said we have to have like a balance, or just like between like having mercy on ourselves and also holding ourselves accountable for whatever we consider was harmful for us.
Yeah.
But I feel like my issue is that I don't hold myself accountable, and I know that sounds silly, but how do you hold yourself accountable and not be too lenient with yourself?
Yeah. I think holding yourself accountable is assessing the behavior. What is it that was wrong about it, right? And then translating it into real action. So not I see this was wrong. And then think, what we don't want to do is we don't want to focus on shaming the self, as if oh, I'm flawed, because that's the difference between shame and guilt. Shame is like, I'm flawed. Something is you know, at least the way that shame is talked about in the context of psychology and the self-help world, we're talking about toxic shame, right? And we're talking about that kind of shame that makes a person flaw their entire selves. And look at we don't want that, right? Because that creates more shame, that actually prevents people from making changes. What we want to do is focus on the behavior, because then it makes you feel like, okay, I can change that. I have the power to change that. So the behavior, acknowledging what was wrong about this behavior, what could be done better, and having that awareness that Allah is watching you as you're being accountable, right? And that being present with Allah as you're being accountable, and taking that to Him. That's seeking forgiveness, asking Him for help with the things, the habits that you want to change, right? And this doesn't mean we're just talking about things that are haram. We're talking about just any habit that you want to like improve, right? Habits that you want to you don't no longer serve you in life, and you want to change them. Be present with Allah as you're even assessing your life and taking inventory on your life. Be present with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and ask Him for his help with it. Nothing is easy unless He makes it easy, right? Say, Allah, I need your help with this. Please help me, you know, please help facilitate this journey for me. And then start taking steps. I think that the way you know you are too lenient is if you're not focused on actions and you're just focused on feelings. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's a big trend now, right? It's that like, it's good to have self-compassion, but if that self-compassion is not leading to you making actual changes, then that's not really self-compassion. Self-compassion should not be void of a prioritization of truth. Right? Self-love is not just telling ourselves what feels good. When you love someone, you don't always tell them what feels good. Actually, you know, they say that's how you know a true friend, right? They don't just tell you what you want to hear. So if self-compassion and self-love is making you, oh, it's okay, this is okay. No. Self-love and self-compassion is that you still see your worth even as you see the wrong of your behavior. Self-love is being kind to yourself and loving to yourself, but as you see the wrong of your behavior. It's not denying truth. It's not coddling. It's that I love me enough to change my behavior, right? And so that's really what sacred self-love is that I see my worth in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this behavior is unbecoming of who He created. Who He created to be worthy of Jannah, right? Or to enter Jannah, right? And so you think of it as, no, this doesn't match what Allah created me for. And I love myself enough, and I see Allah, I see my worth through Allah enough to say that, okay, I'm going to be kind to myself and compassionate to myself, to give myself that energy to move forward and to make changes, but I'm not going to deny the truth. And I'm going to hold myself accountable. That's integrity. That's what we call self-integrity. Self-integrity is when you show up for what is true and what is important, especially even when no one's looking. I hope that answers your question.
Just like to the sister's point, like what you can expect from yourself at different phases of your life is sometimes different as well, right?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes people feel like they fall short when they set a goal that's beyond their current capabilities, right?
It's true. Yeah.
Like the disconnect that you might be feeling from your identity, your actions might be because your identity is changing, right? So
that's true.
Just what I'd add to your point is like, just really part of knowing is like where you're at in your own life.
Yeah.
So it's not always a bad thing if you feel like your actions are not living up to your standard, because that just means you have a high standard. And like,
yeah, I mean, yeah.
The standard might have changed from behaviors or ways of, being lazy or like doing, bad habits or something like that. Like if you're raising your standard, like sometimes it makes you feel worse because your actions really feel worse.
So to see beauty in the fact that, my standards are getting higher, and that's a good thing, right, for yourself.
Yeah.
But also to make sure that, we're talking about values and standards. But when it comes to goals, I appreciate what you said about making sure they're realistic, right? Like, because sometimes people, set themselves up for failure that way, right? Like, and that goes back to knowing yourself that goes back to knowing yourself, because you have to know your limitations. Is this something really you can take on? If you say, I'm going to do this by this time, if you don't know yourself well, you might actually put yourself to a task that you might not be capable of completing. No, jazakallah khair.
Like even in our deen as well, right? I go from one prayer a day and I'm going to go to like 5 all of a sudden. It's like, oh, you're going to set yourself up to fail by going too quick.
Yeah, that's true. So, any other questions?
Actually, I have the opposite thing. So I'm not lenient with myself. I'm so harsh that I put myself so much down. Yeah. So I don't know what to do against it.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you said, I think it's also connected to the fact that sometimes we don't know each other, don't know ourselves so much.
It's a journey.
To be nicer to oneself.
Yeah. I think it goes back to what I said to her about, making sure that you're as you're acknowledging the wrong in your behavior, that you're still not viewing yourself as the flaw, that there's the doors closed between you and Allah, that you're not adding more shame or defining yourself by your behavior, right? And that's really just having a kind eyes. I always say that if you have trouble being compassionate with yourself, imagine, and you're in a situation where you find yourself being harsh, just ask yourself, how would I speak to a friend that I love if they came to me with this struggle? How would I speak to them? And that usually gets people to, oh yeah, wow, I would never say this to them. So then why are you saying it to yourself? Because you wouldn't say it to them because it wouldn't help them. You love a friend and you want to tell her the truth, but you're also going to support her and make her feel loved, right? While still telling her the truth. So we can do the same with ourselves. But the only way we can understand it is if we can imagine it with someone else first. So I think that's them. Okay, we'll stop here, inshallah, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at icnyu.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.